able to hear me? And breaking news, live pictures of Mar-a-Lago, where President-elect Donald Trump and his transition team are here. Trump just announced another round of administration picks. Stephen Witkoff was tapped as special envoy to the Middle East. John Ratcliffe, now named CIA director. Bill McGinley is the new White House counsel. These are big names. A bombshell new report says President-elect Trump is planning to purge, their words, not the executive order's words, generals in the U.S. military using an executive order. The Wall Street Journal writes Trump draft executive order would create board to purge generals. The panel could upend military review process and raise concerns about the politicalization of the military. The report describes a so-called warrior board made up of retired generals and non-commissioned officers who would send their recommendations to the president. Those identified for removal would be retired at their current rank within 30 days. It's something Trump alluded to often during his time on the campaign trail.
We'll get the resignations of every single senior official who touched the Afghanistan calamity to be on my desk at noon on Inauguration Day. You know, you have to fire people. You have to fire people when they do a bad job. We never fire anybody. You got to fire them. Like on The Apprentice, you fired, you did a lousy job.
So it's very clear this is what Donald Trump promised to do. It's what he got elected to do, to dismantle the bureaucracy in Washington. One thing we heard over and over again on the campaign trail is how Americans didn't think Washington worked for them. The first time he was in office, he ran into roadblocks. And now he says he knows and will beat the system.
First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively.
Yet, for some reason, the American media has a problem with that. They believe federal employees deserve endangered species-like protections. The idea of draining the swamp in D.C. is worse to the media than the rapture itself. That's probably because so much of the Washington media is part of the swamp. So this battle is coming in 2025. If Donald Trump is for it, the media ecosystem must be against it. If Elon Musk thinks it's a good idea, it must be a threat to democracy. Take, for example, the National Institutes of Health and the CDC. The sole purpose of those agencies is to keep America healthy. By any reasonable measure, they have been failing miserably. Right now, 133 million Americans have chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease. That's up 15 million since 1995. More than 40% of the country is obese. That's up 35% since 1980. It only makes sense that if you have a failing grade, it's time for change. Basic. You get fired for doing a bad job. Robert F. Kennedy suggested there should be consequences for missing the mark.
We're going to fire on day one, or if you can't fire them, we can ship them to a new HHS headquarters in Guam.
And the reason he mentioned Guam is because it's so hard to actually fire federal employees, even when they're bad at their job, even when they're failing miserably. Somehow the media in America went from holding the government accountable to protecting the bureaucrats. Then there's the Department of Education. Well, you can agree the Department of Education might have something to do with America's learning epidemic. In fact, it was created in 1980. Since then, the Department of Education has increased spending by 1,200%. Test scores, depending on how you look at them, are only up 2%. So just look at where American students stand compared to the rest of the world. 28th in math, 12th in science, 6th in reading. Perhaps, maybe that might have something to do with the people at the Department of Education. They think not. The Department of Education, their friends in the media, think everything is just dandy. We know Trump wants to get rid of the Department of Education, therefore the media must protect the Department of Education. Today, former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos explained why Trump's idea isn't so bad.
The department doesn't really add any value anywhere. Only 9% of spending for K-12 education nationally comes from the federal government, yet over 90% of the regulation comes. So all of those funds go out with strings attached, requiring states and communities to do things the way this federal agency in Washington dictates it be done. And I guarantee you, almost all of the folks there have an agenda.
Ronald Reagan once said that the closest thing you'll ever get to eternal life is a government program or a government agency. What's confounding is why the media seems to think that they are the protectors of that eternal life. Batya Ungar-Sargon is here, opinion editor at Newsweek, author of Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. Batya, it's so good to see you. How did government bureaucrats become the sacred cow of not just the media, but who you write about, the elites?
Thank you so much for having me on the fairest show on television, Leland. It's great to be here with you. This is all just class solidarity. These bureaucracies operate as jobs programs for the over-credentialed and over-educated. We are overproducing people with a college degree. And because they think that they are so much better than people without that degree, because the elites are simply powered by their contempt for the working class, who, by the way, we all rely on to survive, they need jobs that pay them, an elite salary to get them into that top 20%, which now controls over 50% of the GDP. And so you have these immense government bureaucracies that exist solely to perpetuate the class divide, to keep people who have that credential in a position of elite status, so they can continue not only to look down on the working class, but actually to make their lives much, much worse, because they use these bureaucracies to perpetuate the class divide, to actually make themselves in a higher status. We saw that throughout the pandemic so clearly, how people in these positions of power use their power to make the lives of people who are out there braving the pandemic absolutely unlivable and unbearable while they stayed at home collecting their paycheck.
Yeah, look, still in Washington, D.C., the federal government has not returned to the offices. And everybody says, well, maybe that's a good thing because less gets done, except they're still being paid a full salary to stay at home. All the small businesses that relied on those workers, the dry cleaners and the delis and everybody else are up a creek right now and are shutting down, and the government workers are still at home getting paid. You and I may have a slightly different view on this. Robert F. Kennedy does have some really wacky ideas, but like a lot of people who have some odd ideas, he also brings up some pretty disturbing facts. Here he is talking about just how bad NIH and CDC have done, or how bad of a job they have done at their main mission, which is keeping America healthy.
When my uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease, and we spent zero on chronic disease in this country. Today, probably around 60%. We don't know the exact number because NIH stopped publishing that number in 2006. But by 2006, it had raised to 54%.
Okay, so we all know that the poorest among us are the ones, right, who have suffered the worst from ill health and everything else. Why is trying to address, I'll use the pejorative word, root causes of this so threatening?
It's such a great question, Leland. I really think that, RFK Jr., maybe I don't agree with his solutions, but the fact that he is elevating these problems is so important. We're living in a kind of inversion of, the French Revolution, to where all of the richest people are stick thin, and those who are like just regular thin are now on Ozempic, so they're really, really, really thin. And all of the poor and working class are overweight while doing jobs that require physical manual labor, and nobody cares about this. Like nobody has, this matters at all. So I really admire R.K. Jr. for putting this on the table. When I was reporting my book, the top two issues that working-class Americans talked to me about were immigration and healthcare. And this was whether they were Republicans or Democrats. They all wanted much less immigration and much more access to high-quality healthcare. So if Donald Trump can see past the solutions that R.K. Jr. sometimes proposes, to just the importance of having a healthy nation, through like the obvious commonsensical approaches of like healthy food, exercise, which are the ways that the elites stay thin, I think this could be a revolution for our country, for a nation really hurting on this front.
It's such a fascinating point, and why it's so important that you go out, you talk to people and meet them where they're at, as you did for your book, and you find out these sort of amazing things about their lives, and about what really is crushing them. And the inverse of the French Revolution, it's a phenomenal mental image because it also rings true. One thing that you hear over and over and over again from, you would say, working class voters, the new Trump voters who were longtime Democrats who have now switched over, is this anti-elite, anti-establishment, burn Washington to the ground. And living in Washington, it's very hard to disagree with them on that. But in an odd way, Donald Trump is sort of trying to create his own dynasty, right? He's at Mar-a-Lago. He's surrounded by whatever team you want to call them. But it's certainly people who are loyal to him. And he talks about that all the time. His staff talks about it all the time, the importance of loyalty to him. Not necessarily even loyalty to MAGA or to tearing down the Washington establishment, but to Donald Trump. And now there is reports that if Marco Rubio is nominated as Secretary of State, resigns as senator, as he would have to do, that there is a chance that Trump would appoint his daughter-in-law, who was head of the RNC. And now there's members of Congress who are all in on tearing the establishment down and creating the Trump dynasty. Take a listen.
She has the qualification. She proved herself not just, I think, as a national leader, but also as a stateswoman. You know, she fought for election integrity nationally, and I would argue was largely responsible for securing President Trump's win.
Is there a Trump dynasty?
It's very hard to separate being loyal to the Trump agenda from being loyal to Trump the man, because all of the people who were disloyal to the Trump agenda in the first term were disloyal to Trump the person. I mean, of course, it's true Lara Trump has worked unbelievably hard in the RNC to bring about this massive victory. But I do think that Trump, you cannot overstate the degree to which it took an insane character like Trump, a person who was so uniquely qualified in his character, to say, I don't care what anybody thinks about me, left or right. I'm going to do what I think is best for this country. So I think it's a little bit misplaced to say, oh, these are litmus test, loyalty tests to Trump the person. I mean, Rubio himself has criticized Trump the man very aggressively, and it took him a while to get on board with the America First foreign policy agenda, although I think he did get there. But there, of course, right now is this very vigorous debate over whether he got far enough into the MAGA world's version.
And look, and to be fair, we have not heard from Donald Trump that he's nominating Marco Rubio. There have been a lot of reports. There have been a lot of leaks out of Mar-a-Lago. Batya, thank you very much. Breaking news in just the past few minutes in terms of who Donald Trump says himself he will nominate. He will nominate Pete Hegseth to serve as Secretary of Defense. Hegseth is an Army veteran who now works at Fox News. Weekend Fox and Friends. In his statement, Trump said Pete is a courageous and patriotic champion for Trump's peace through strength policy. NewsNation Kelly Meyer with more. I've worked with Pete Hegseth. I know him, so I'm sort of putting this all together. Do we have any more on how this name that wasn't anywhere around and a guy who was a sort of barely field grade Army officer and then TV anchor is now Secretary of Defense?
Yeah, I mean, we are just getting this breaking news into our newsroom here in D.C. And this wasn't really a name that was being tossed around in circles when you talked about the Secretary of Defense. You mentioned, too, he did volunteer to serve in Afghanistan and Iraq. He was also, the last time around, as I've been researching him before we came on air, Leland, last time around, he was considered to lead the Department of Veteran Affairs in the first Trump administration, but then David Shulkin was selected. So it's interesting, and I didn't realize that he was considered potentially before, and now he's coming back around to him. So there must be something that he likes about him. He obviously has served. He also had a bid to run in the Senate as well. So he has a political background. He has a service background. And now, obviously, he also is good on TV, which is something that President-elect Trump also looks at from his perspective and background doing television.
Yeah, there's going to be some real issues, perhaps in the confirmation hearing about Hegseth's personal life that will come out. And in this, we've seen this before with presidents and with Donald Trump himself, who's nominated people that has the credentials you just talked about. I'm thinking about when he nominated Ronnie Jackson for Veterans Affairs and things got difficult afterwards. Pete Hegseth. For one thing you can say about him, he has always been loyal to Donald Trump. I remember anchoring with him at Fox and Friends when he was all in. He would cross out on the newspapers that were put on the set in the morning, the New York Times, and he would write the failing New York Times in Sharpie on the top of the newspapers on the set. So that's where his mind is. Pete Hegseth, now nominated as Secretary of Defense. And boy, confirmation hearings to come that will be must-see TV. Right. Kelly, thank you very much. Back to you with more as you get it from your sources. Live pictures of the White House tomorrow morning. President-elect Trump comes to see President Biden for their ceremonial meeting in the Oval Office. Ordinarily, the future First Lady would come too. Melania Trump, though, won't be there. What will Melania's second term as First Lady look like? Welcome back. Live pictures of the White House, where President-elect Donald Trump will meet with President Biden tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. The New York Post reports Melania Trump will not be there to meet with Jill Biden at the White House. It's a tradition that goes back decades. Melania is telling friends it's the Mar-a-Lago raid. She ain't going, a source familiar with Melania's decision told the Post. Jill Biden's husband authorized the FBI snooping through her underwear drawer. The Bidens are disgusting, the source said. With us now, executive editor of politics at the Daily Mail, Kelly Lako. Kelly, how much are we to believe that this is Melania Trump trying to make a statement about just the FBI raid and the Bidens, or about her role and what Melania's second term as First Lady will look like?
Well, I think this is Melania really making a clear stand right off the bat. She clearly has beef with Jill for going years back to 2020. I think it really came to a head after Trump was shot. Jill called Melania. Melania said it was a fake call. You know, Jill was just spewing, he's a dictator, he's evil. These are the kind of languages that got him shot in the first place. So I think it really comes back to there's, deep-seated issues between the two ladies, and I don't think a Tea Party is going to put any of that behind them.
So what are we to make of what this is of Melania's, never mind power, because she's the First Lady, she has all the power she wants, but how she's going to exercise it in her second term?
I think Melania has a whole new media landscape in front of her. It's a very interesting time to be Melania Trump. We've seen it a few times so far. We've gotten small glimpses where she came out against Donald's abortion, pro-life policy. She said she was pro-choice. We've seen her publish a couple interesting, quick hits on social media, quick videos. It's a new landscape. She has Elon Musk in her pocket now. If she wants to get her voice out, her voice heard, she's going to work with him. She kind of gets to circumvent sort of the traditional media landscape that we've seen. Traditionally, First Ladies, Vogue appearances, that's behind Melania. She knows she's not going to get those. She's now focused on getting her message out and what she wants directly to to the people. I would say through X is a great medium. I think she'll be able to pick and choose her media appearances she does. And I think that we saw her sort of come in on Trump's campaign as a closer. She was there at the MSG rally. She spoke. She was there on his election night victory speech. She's really coming in as the wife, the first lady that we've seen her be in the past. And I think, even if she does end up splitting time between the White House and New York, we'll see her pop in when it's convenient to her and when she really has a message she wants the American people to hear.
It doesn't seem as though she has fully embraced, dare I say, the traditional first lady role, but certainly isn't at that point yet. But there's a difference here, right, in that you point out covers on Vogue and Vanity Fair and everything else, compared to what First Ladies Michelle Obama, Jill Biden, Kamala Harris's VP got, and then Melania Trump, who had been one of the more successful models in the world, didn't get. And then there was this picture, right? This was the famous picture that she wore the jacket, "I really don't care, do you?" And what that message was sent to, who that message was focused on. Does she get a fair shake by the rest of the media in her second term?
I think no matter what Melania Trump does, the media are going to be poking holes into it, trying to find, a sinister motive, as they did with the "So You Do Even Care" jacket. We've seen Jill Biden also wear apparel that, screams a message. She was wearing a vote dress recently. She's had other pieces of clothing that really send a clear message that she's pro-abortion. She has, these more liberal policies, but they don't get picked apart in the press. So I think what Melania Trump really is going to need to do is surround herself with close MAGA confidence. And I think that, her staff going into this next administration is going to be key. She really needs to have people who have her back and that can push her message, help her get out in front of herself and, really stake her claim. And that will come into play as she, decides to choose, what issues she's going to be most passionate about. This time, last go around, it was children. You can see that again. She's very passionate about being a mother to Barron. She's going to be spending some time in New York. So I think it really comes down to, who Trump and Melania are surrounding themselves with this next go around. It's going to really come down to that.
Look, and I think it's fair to say, right, that she has a tradition of sort of saying the most when she says nothing at all. Her actions tend to speak a lot louder than her words.
Yes, I agree with that. I think she put out a video last week basically saying, Trump and I are coming into the office. We respect the office, but not much more beyond that. I think she'll start to hone in on her message a little bit better this administration. I think she's still coming into her own on social media. She really explores X and other platforms, including Truth Social. Yeah. I could see her maybe launching a TikTok in the future. Her son Barron has been really influential with Donald in terms of getting him on podcasts. Maybe she'll go on Megyn Kelly podcast. Maybe she'll hit up some more of the non-traditional media routes that we haven't seen her done before, and I think that would be smart. I think it'd be wise for her to engage in those.
Yeah, fair enough. Fascinating, and tomorrow she will not be there. So Donald Trump comes to the White House as the president-elect for a second time. Kelly, thank you very much. Coverage of that on the NN app, the NewsNation app, for more on all the big stories. You can watch us anytime and anywhere. You may know South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem best for shooting her dog and lying about a meeting with Kim Jong-un. Does that make her qualified to run the Department of Homeland Security? Or is Donald Trump just outsmarting everyone with this possible pick? Live pictures of Miami, Florida, not Mar-a-Lago. So why are we showing you Miami? Well, former mayor of Miami Beach says the city might just be the key that Democrats so desperately need. Philip Levine writes, when it comes to reforming the message, this is less like a renovation and more like a new construction. We need to tear down leftist woke policies and rebuild a modern Clintonian party in their place, one that is in touch both culturally and economically with the American people. Anything less than a reconstruction would be doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Might be hard to remember, but Florida was once considered a swing state. Former President Clinton won the state in '96. Former President Obama, 2008 and 2012, won Florida. Times have changed. Miami-Dade County, the largest in the state, flipped red in 2020 after 2 decades of voting blue. Stayed red last week when Trump won the county by over 11 points. Philip Levine, former mayor of Miami Beach, a lifelong Democrat, joins us now. Is this the last chance for the Democratic Party?
I think it is for a long time, Leland. I think there's a 911. Clearly, there's no question. It's time to break the glass, okay? Because if things don't turn around, I don't know how much deeper red Florida can get. But remember something, it wasn't that it used to be a swing state, Leland. This was a blue state early on. And we've had, of course, many Democratic governors and Democratic senators. Like the last one, I think, was Senator Bill Nelson, who right now is running NASA. So this is it. Now's the time to move for the party.
Look, you've been talking about this. Seth Moulton's been talking about it. There have been a few voices, but largely any attempt to even have this conversation has been met with the same tactics that were used to put down any unorthodox or unaccepting demands by the elites, right? You know, if you didn't want a vaccine, you were anti-science. You didn't want to mask your kid, you were anti-science. You didn't like unlimited aid for Ukraine, well, then you're pro-Putin. These same tactics are being used against you now. What's your battle plan?
I think proof is in the pudding. I mean, it wasn't that half of America voted for Donald Trump. Over half of America voted for Donald Trump. And of course, the entire state of Florida did, including Miami-Dade County, that used to be Democratic. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is, people, when I say people, I mean Republicans and the majority of Democrats, truly don't want to see Hamas on campus. They want to make sure the borders are controlled. They want to be able to walk around cities and feel safe, which means the police are empowered to professionally police. They want to make sure that the politicians they're electing in office are capitalists. They are not socialists, because this entire country was built on capitalism. So these varied things, including, of course, other areas, these are things that are paramount to getting elected. And I don't care if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. And the Democratic Party has moved, unfortunately, in these areas, and it has to change. Now, you'll see all these Democrats now coming up saying, oh, I knew it was the case. We should have done this. We should have. You know what I call them, Leland? I call them hindsight heroes. You see them on the various networks now. Oh, there's a reason why. We understand why, we shouldn't have a man and female sports. But it's a little bit like Johnny-come-lately. They're hindsight heroes. They should have been there before. Now's the time for the Democratic Party for a full reconstruction.
Okay, so to be fair to our viewers, you've been saying this for a while. And you've been willing to come out and talk about it. I have to tell you, you almost sound a little bit more like a Republican, but there's a different way of looking at this, right? In 2020, 21, 22, if you didn't say you should defund the police, then you are racist. If you didn't say boys can be girls, then you are transphobic, on and on. Fine. But what Republicans are advocating, what Donald Trump won on, is not anything different than what America has always believed, right? Democrats have been trying to change the way America believes, and it hasn't worked. Do you see any willingness by members of your party, the leaders of your party, to come back to agreeing on what America is and what America believes, and then debating the policies of how we get there?
I think there is. And Leland, I think the bottom line is, if you're a Democrat, you need to stop talking about things that Americans are not interested in. You need to start talking about being an American. You need to start talking about patriotism. And if you're in the state of Florida, you need to start talking about the love of Florida. And I think that's what the Democratic Party needs to and must get back. Nothing is more sobering than an absolute knockout punch. And that's what we experienced in this election, was a knockout punch. So there's nowhere to go but up for the Democratic Party. And remember, in 1980, when Jimmy Carter got defeated, this country and the Democratic Party went through Dukakis and McGovern and Mondale, and they were way out in the desert until this hillbilly from Arkansas showed up by the name of Bill Clinton. And he showed the Democratic Party a way forward. And I believe that's what's going to happen next. So we have to get through those stages
of breathe. You're talking about a Clintonian way forward. This is Andrew Cuomo talking, maybe not necessarily a Clintonian, but a non-anti-Trump way forward. Take a listen.
We were so blinded by our hate for Trump and assumed that everybody was going to see that we were right and that he was bad. And we were so consumed with making the negative on Trump, we never made the positive case for the Democratic Party.
I'll give you the last 30 seconds.
Governor
in order
Cuomo
to make a positive case, you have to have a case to make. Yeah. And what 100%. I think you and I have been talking about is the case that was being made of girls, boys can be girls, and defund the police, and no question of aid to Ukraine, on and on and on. That was a case for the Democratic Party. It just didn't work. There's a difference.
100%. And Governor Cuomo is 1,000% correct. And one thing Bill Clinton told me years ago, he said to me, you don't win an election because the other guy they don't like. You win an election because they like you, they love you, and they come out for you because they like your message. Democratic Party had no message in this election. The only message was they hate Donald Trump. And that is not a winning message, Leland.
Well, it's not, although there's members of Congress on the Democratic side who seem to think opposing Donald Trump is the Democrats' mandate. So we'll see how it goes. Mayor, it's good to see you as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Donald Trump's cabinet is incoming. Live look at Mar-a-Lago. Auditions for The Apprentice, White House edition, continue. Pete Hegseth has been named for Secretary of Defense. The president has reportedly tapped Kristi Noem for Homeland Security. Is Trump seeing something we don't? Mar-a-Lago, Florida. And we are now seeing the speed and reminded of the speed that a Donald Trump administration or Donald Trump transition moves at. Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have now been tapped to lead what Trump calls the Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, D-O-G-E, which is, curiously enough, the same name as a cryptocurrency that Elon Musk has gotten behind in the past, Dogecoin. DOGE will be an outside government agency inside the government, at least according to the press release from Trump transition, that will be in charge of addressing government spending. Earlier, Trump announced Fox News personality Pete Hegseth has been nominated for Secretary of Defense. To say that would be unusual would be an understatement. Early 40s, a little bit of combat experience in the Army, and quite a questionable personal life. Meantime, the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, will reportedly run the Department of Homeland Security because we have not yet gotten the official release from Trump Vance. It's been floated out there. It has been leaked over the past 12 hours, but has not been confirmed by Trump transition. She's currently the governor of a state with a budget of just over $7 billion, South Dakota. The Department of Homeland Security has a budget of more than $62 billion, nearly 9 times as much. Her state employs 13,000 people. The DHS employs 260,000 people. It is an enormous job on scale. We are now showing live pictures of Eagle Pass, Texas, on the southern border. This is part of the 1,951 miles that would be Noem's responsibility. Past DHS secretaries include former 4-star General John Kelly, former federal appeals court judge Michael Chertoff, and former acting secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, who joins us now. Good to see you, sir. Thank you. Just in terms of scale and understanding, can anybody be ready to go from the governor of South Dakota, a small state, relatively isolated, to a sprawling 50-state agency plus international divisions in charge of Homeland Security for all of America?
Look, to be honest with you, I think it's a challenge for anyone stepping into that role as DHS secretary. It's a complex department. As you indicated, it's a very large department, but it's got 8 operating components in their mission sets, and their challenges are very different. Now, we've had a number of governors step into that role. Obviously, you had the governor of Pennsylvania, you had the governor of Arizona. So there is a model there that governors can step into that role and be successful. As far as Governor Noem's concerned, obviously, she's been a successful governor. She's deployed her National Guard to the border. She's worked with FEMA on natural disasters in her state. So I think she's about as well prepared as most to take that job on.
All right, fair enough. In just in the past 30 seconds or so, 7:47 at night, so we can all get used to late nights as we had during the Trump administration. No more 5 o'clock cocktails in Washington in a Trump administration. Donald Trump has made it official that Kristi Noem will be his nominee for the DHS job. Being the nominee means you go through Senate confirmation hearings. Those, from sitting there, can be challenging. Kristi Noem is perhaps known for best just in the ecosystem for two things. One, that she shot and killed a dog and wrote about it in her book. Two, that her book said she met with Kim Jong-un, which she did not. We'll play back to back her being asked about those two situations. Take a listen.
So you did not meet with Kim Jong-un. That's what you're saying.
No, I've met with many, many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. I think I've talked extensively in this book about my time serving in Congress, my time as governor, before governor, some of the travels that I've had. I'm not going to talk about my specific meetings with world leaders. I'm just not going to do that. This anecdote shouldn't have been in the book.
Dog attacked people. You said it had tried to bite you. And I just wonder why you concluded that a young dog was untrainable and not just take it to a shelter.
This dog was a working dog, and it had come from a family that had already had issues with this dog. And I had put months and months of training into this dog. This dog had gone to other trainers as well. So all of that is the facts of the story, and all of that shows that when you put someone in a position where they have to make a decision and they want to protect their family and protect children and other people from getting attacked from an animal that has attacked others and killed livestock, that's the choice I made over 20 years ago, and that I didn't ask somebody else to take that responsibility for me.
All right, Chad. Won't ask you to comment on either of those two things, but you've been before the United States Senate and the United States House. What's that like? Can being governor, can appearing on cable news prepare you for confirmation hearings, for hearings that are going to come about Donald Trump's policies on the border?
Well, I think in part, yes. Obviously, the governor has to, obviously manages the state and does a lot of TV, thinks quickly on her feet, interacts with a lot of different people. That's a little bit about what the mission is there at the department. Obviously, the other side of that is actually learning and understanding the mission sets within the department, its budget, its resource challenges, everything, associated with it. I think that's the part where she'll obviously get up to speed very quickly during her confirmation period, and when she gets into office. But I think, again, as she's surrounded by a good team, you've got folks like Tom Homan that'll be part of that. I think she'll do just fine.
Yeah, Tom Homan, whose name you brought up, Trump saying is going to be the border czar, leading ICE under DHS. And as you pointed out, and I think we've seen on television, he's a unique talent. And has long served the country honorably. Appreciate you hopping on late with us tonight. Thank you for being here. We'll talk soon, all right?
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. We first wrote about Kristi Noem. You might call it a curious pick, especially given what we know about her in War Notes. That is our free newsletter, comes out every day, 4 p.m. Eastern. Give yourself a better life by subscribing for free, warnotes.com. You've heard a lot of hyperventilation about Donald Trump's revenge tour. Why you're only getting half of the story when we come back.
And direct threats made by Trump and other of his supporters about retribution to be taken against those that were brave enough over the years to speak out.
Who knows how far that he will take this revenge tour, because that's all the next 4 years. God forbid a million times that he wins. The entire 4 years will be dedicated to Donald Trump exacting revenge on his political enemies or his critics.
I am prepared to face the consequences simply for telling the truth.
All right, depending on what network you watch, most of the coverage is about what Donald Trump might do to his political enemies, or at least they say they're very worried about that. Mark Zaid, America's top national security lawyer, says he's told clients to get out of the country and joins us now. We've known for Trump to be pretty hyperbolic. Are you being hyperbolic when you tell people to leave the country?
No, and it's not as serious as that sounds. Actually, what I have said to a very small cadre of clients who are the most vulnerable because they've been specifically identified at times by either the president or his inner circle is go take a vacation around Inauguration Week and let's see what happens. They have promised swift retribution. And Trump has said that he wants his second term to be one of fulfillment of promises. And so if he's going to fulfill the promises, let's wait and we'll see what happens. If he doesn't fulfill them, that's great. He'll be back to business as usual. And, I'll be a regular lawyer and there'll be regular commentators and we'll see what happens.
There seems to be something, and I get it, but there's something to be sort of made of this culture of fear around Donald Trump, and there's some kind of currency of, oh my God, I stood up to Trump and Trump is going to come after me, on and on. The flip side is Donald Trump today, his lawyers filed a motion and were denied or extended for the business records case in New York. That was filed by a district attorney who said, I'm going to get Donald Trump. That's what Alvin Bragg ran on. It is in a state, New York State, where the attorney general there, Tish James, ran, and we have her on tape over and over and over again saying, I am going to get Donald Trump. And I'm just curious, in terms of this, how it seems fair.
Look, I get it. I was not a fan, never have been, just like you have expressed on your shows, of the New York case, of aspects of the Georgia case, of lawfare. I've been dealing with lawfare for the last 4 years because Trump and his supporters have been suing countless critics in civil litigation that we've had to defend against. And so they have been already engaging in this conduct. And I'm actually less concerned at times about the federal government as I am about Republican MAGA attorneys general, states attorneys, local attorneys who may feel compelled to act in the same manner that we saw in New York and Georgia. I get it. I wish all of this would stop. Let's grow up
Mark,
and get back.
I'm going to cut you off before the computer does. And I got to tell you, I completely agree with you when you say I wish all this would stop, given the problems we have in the country and what the election was about. Mark, thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. Boy, more breaking news out of Mar-a-Lago with Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Cuomo. Welcome to NewsNation. Trump filled more big positions today. The names are all familiar, if the positions will seem a little odd. The latest is Fox firebrand Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. This is going to stir controversy, as will Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to head the Department of Government Efficiency, which doesn't exist yet. And we're going to discuss why there is controversy and if it's really warranted. We also know Governor